so now let's look at verse 18. It says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them." We'll stop right there. Actually, read verse 22. "For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." All right, we'll stop there. So now, we're going to look at this next section here like it's a courtroom setting. We kind of touched on it last week and just kind of did an overview. But verse 18, notice it's the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. This is going to show, this is God's right to judge the offender, okay? He's righteous, right? The righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith. So think of this, like I said, courtroom setting like an arraignment. So an informing of the charges against the sinner. And so Paul's the prosecution, mankind's the defendant, okay? Now, we're going to go over the charges. The charges really span from verse 19 all the way to chapter 3, verse 18. Okay? It's really where they span. So I've got them broke down in a little bit. It's charge number one, which we'll talk about tonight. Man willfully rejects God and God's word. Okay? Charge number two. I've got the verses up here too if you want to write them down. Chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, man's attempt to be righteous. Okay? Charge number 3, chapter 2, verses 12 through 16, ignorance of the law. Charge 4, chapter 2, 17 through 29, hypocrisy. Charge number 5, chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, the accusation that God is complicit with man's sin. And then charge number 6, chapter 3, 9 through 18, just man's inability. Absolute. That talks about the throat's an open sepulcher, all of that. Just man's inability. So we're going to talk about the willful rejection of God and God's word. All right. So once again, it says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness." Okay? So notice that man is described, it's ungodliness and unrighteousness. You see that? So that implies guilt. Ungodliness and unrighteousness. So we're going to read here, we're going to see there's a testimony that God has placed in man. Okay? Now, we might touch on it some tonight, but next week we'll talk about it more. This testimony that's placed in man works in conjunction with the testimony that's on the outer, which is going to be creation. They work together. And how it works together is this is going to show that in every person there is something that says there is a God. Okay? Just think about it for a minute before. So, how many religions would you say there is in the world? Would you say there's more people that believe in a supreme being than there is that are just completely atheists? Like way, way more, right? I would say probably 90% or more of the entire world probably worship something or someone, do they not?
Which means even the atheists believe in something.
Yeah.
But it's not what they want to admit it.
Right. Which we're going to talk about that because over time, layer upon layer of stuff just tried to use the cover. It talks about that suppressing the truth. So or holding the truth in unrighteousness. But so I would say every person innately has within them something that testifies that there is a creator, there is a God, right? Now the charge is that man willfully rejects God. And so once again we'll look at verse 19. Notice it says, because that which may be known of God is manifest where? In them. You see that? It's in them. That which may be known of God is manifest in them. Okay? For God hath showed it unto them. And then it's going to start talking about creation. But God has placed in man, all man, this innate, you could say, it would be your conscience, right? But this innate knowing that there is something, someone that is supreme, or however you want to say it, but that there is a God. Now, over time, how many years has passed since then, since He created everything? I mean, it's been a long time. And what has man done ever since then? Whatever they wanted, right? They've willfully rejected. So over time, just think about, just use our country for example. Things that go on now, would that be acceptable 100 years ago? Absolutely not. Not even close. But you see how does it get to that point? Just little, it's like just slowly covering, just little by little, the layers, right? Every time you allow something or don't, it's foolish acts and stuff, just it adds another layer. So it holds, so just using that as an example, nowadays people 100 years ago, if they could look in the future and see what's going on in this country now, I mean, I don't know what they would do, right? So just think about that here, where with He created man, and man has continually rejected and opposed and done whatever they wanted to do, right? Verse 22 of Romans 1, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, right? It was man's ideas, man's wisdom, and it's all foolishness. And so that's what holds the truth, okay? So, let's look back at verse 19. So verse 18. So the wrath is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. That hold the truth, okay? That hold there is like, what I said, like suppress, like a holding cell. You put something in it, it can't, like it can't move past that point, okay? So man's unrighteousness and ungodliness that holds back that truth. It's the truth of God, of knowing God, and all of that by the conscience and all that testifying along with creation. Man rejects that, so therefore they're holding back the truth. You see that? Okay? Now, once again, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them. All man has had that. Look over at chapter 2, Romans chapter 2. Look at verse 14. Romans chapter 2, verse 14. For when the Gentiles which have not the law do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another. Their conscience, okay? That's what, so, it's kind of, go a little bit more into this. So in Genesis, with Adam and Eve, what was the commandment that God gave them in the garden?
Eat of any tree except for the tree of knowledge of good.
Except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? Now, this is important because this is what me and Eric was talking about the other day. What is probably one of the biggest things that you hear from people, different denominations and things, or people that don't believe, as an issue with sole focus on God's Word? And the need for missionary work. Like, they would say it's not fair because there's some group somewhere that's never heard about God. Have you heard that argument before? You know, of course they say, you know, some tribe of some kind in the middle of the rainforest that has never, ever, ever heard anything taught about God. So how could it be fair for them to be judged the same way as the rest of man, right? Now, most of these, though, if you look at it, most of the time these individual little groups and stuff, they have something they worship, do they not? And do they also probably have a certain codes of conduct. It might be very basic, but if you don't have a code to not kill each other, what's going to happen to your tribe? They're all going to be wiped out, right? So where does that basic code come from? Where does that need for them to worship something come from? Now, I mean, granted, there's confusion, right? Because they shouldn't, you know, but it's there. Now, so get back to Adam. So Adam eats the fruit, right? Eve takes it, was deceived. Adam eats it willingly, and what happens? God comes, and where's Adam? He's hiding. Why is he hiding?
No, he knows.
He knows, right? Why? He knows what?
The bad.
He did wrong, right? He knows. He's hiding. He's hiding because he is guilty. He's ashamed. Where did that come from?
He had information stored in his conscience.
Exactly.
That's what Paul's talking when he said a seared conscience.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's very important. Like, so all man has that. Now, so this is where this is very, very important, because I've probably found that's one of the biggest arguments that's been argued with me about this, is that kind of thing. Well, there's people that's never heard.
Yeah, we have two witnesses.
They have,
Nation
and their conscience. Now, if they, like what you said, sear their conscience, which I would say, like what I was trying with the layer thing, just the repetitive exposure and also just actions against it, right? And rejecting that. So now let's look at Genesis 4 real quick. Genesis chapter 4. Genesis chapter 4, look at verse 8. Everybody knows the story of Cain and Abel, right? And it says, "And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? Why did he lie?
He knew he did wrong.
He knew he did wrong. You see? The conscience, right? I mean, if there was no moral or any of that, then why not just say, well, he's in the field, I killed him. You see? He lied. And then he's like, am I my brother's keeper? Well, I mean, you should have been, right? As far as taking care of one another. But you see that, I mean, already here, you've got Adam, he hid himself, right? Sin entered in. Adam hides himself. His son kills his other son, and he's lying about it. Right? So I'm just kind of trying to show that inner conscience thing. So now you can see how it would be a charge that man willfully rejects God, because that is one of the testimonies that there is one, that God is. Okay? And it's innate in man. Now on the flip side, we have the outer testimony, back to Romans 1. The outer testimony, and that's creation itself, right? Now these things are in conjunction one with another. Our conscience and then creation itself. There's two testimonies that God is. Okay? So Romans 1 verse 20. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. See that? Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Okay? Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. So there's the charge. Creation testifies there is a Creator, right? Creation testifies there's a God. You look outside there, and there should be no denying that there's an individual up there that designed it all, right? And I get in these discussions with people at work about this. I get this stuff thrown at me all the time, which they always try to use science, and I don't think necessarily you should use science to prove the Bible, right? Because science is not infallible, right? But they always get in arguments about this, and I'm always just like, well, just look outside. You mean to tell me that you can look out there and think that all that just came from nothing? You know? It would take a lot more faith to believe that way. Would you think so? I mean, to think that there was a chemical whatever that set off and created a single-celled organism, and that just continually transformed over so many millions and billions of years till eventually we have everything that we have now. And that's not including the things that are so meticulously designed mathematically. That was the question I actually threw out yesterday to an individual. I threw out two different things out of math that they've seen in creation. There's the Fibonacci sequence and stuff like that with the curves and stuff. Like, I mean, that doesn't just happen, And so it's, but once again, what is the greater majority, the course of this world and mankind as a whole, what's the agenda?
Worship the creature.
To worship the creature more than the Creator, right? professing themselves to be wise, right? Instead of God, to God only wise, it's man, right? So, but creation testifies, there is a testimony in creation that God is. And there is a testimony in ourselves, in all man, that God is. So, man's guilty. Charge number 1, willful rejection. Okay? Now, we'll get into maybe into the creation more next week. But why? I'll talk a little bit more about the charges. Of charge number 2, man's attempt to be righteous. How would that be a charge?
There's none righteous.
There's none righteous, right? Does man try to be righteous though? Self-righteous? Religion, right? Religion, performing, right? All that, okay? What about ignorance of the law? That's still a charge now, ain't it? But anyways, ignorance of the law. Okay, what about hypocrisy? I think man's hypocritical. Talks about you teach to not steal, but yet you steal, right? Does that happen? That's about everybody, ain't it? All right. What about charge number 5? The accusation that God is complicit with man's sin. When I was studying this out, the argument is going to actually be made that God needs man to be sinners because he's holy. In Romans chapter 3. So, that sounds pretty crazy, but does that not sound like something man would say? Well, you made me a sinner, and you need me to be a sinner because you're a holy. If I what? You see the argument? See the argument? So, the charges are, it leaves it to where nobody can get out of being charged guilty. Okay? And then charge number 6, just man's inability at all to be anything but a sinner. Alright. Back to chapter 1. Sorry, I got off on a tangent. Alright, so verse 19, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. Like what we said, we have the inner testimony, our conscience that God is, and it says, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So the 2 testimonies, all right?